Hey everyone, welcome to the video. My name is Solomon Thomas. I'm a former Marine Corps veteran, and I just got my master's in general psychology. I have the goal of becoming a clinical psychologist and professor one day, so I'm making these YouTube videos to practice articulating myself and clarifying my beliefs and sharing the different ideas that I come across in my studies with anyone out there who's listening. In today's video, I wanted to talk about compassion and perhaps more specifically when compassion goes too far. I'm currently reading Dostoyevsky's books, and I just finished The Idiot. And I think that an exploration of some of the themes and scenes in that story can help with this discussion. So, The Idiot was published in the late 1860s in Russia, and Dostoevsky was interested in generating a Christ like character that was unwavering in his grace and compassion, and seeing how that character would fare in the current ideologies and culture of 1860s Russia at that time. And at that time, Russia was much like our Western culture is today. I would say it's very atheistic, rational, materialistic. And so The Idiot is an exploration of this protagonist who is perhaps naively and overly idealistic, and seeing how he deals with the hyper rational intellect and the true reality of suffering of the everyday person in the story. Why is Prince Mishkin, that's the main protagonist, called the idiot? There's a few reasons why. One, he suffers from epileptic seizures, and so that's one sense. Although that mental illness doesn't appear to impact his character too much, unless there's something that I just missed from the book, and that's definitely likely. In another sense, he's like a child. Many of the characters call him an idiot. They call him a holy fool. They call him childlike because he is genuine and authentic to a fault. He's also, as I mentioned, very compassionate and seeks to forgive everyone that he encounters, regardless of the sins that they commit. He either forgives them and shows compassion because he sees something that's good in them, or he abdicates their responsibility by demonstrating his compassion and saying that, well, they're suffering so much and that's why they have done this atrocious thing, so it's not really their fault. If you could see why they're suffering and how they're suffering from either childhood or something recently, or mental illness has caused them to do the things that they've done or commit the crimes that they've committed, then you would understand that they are worthy of love and compassion. And the thing about Mishkin that I think makes him such a complex character is that he's definitely someone of admiration, in my opinion, even though I don't think he's my favorite character. My favorite character is Lizaveta. I think I'm mispronouncing that name, but that's how I'm going to say it in this video. And we'll get to her in a moment. But the prince, in the small gestures of his interactions with everyone from old drunk people to young children and siblings of some of his peers, he gives them attention. He treats them as if they're worthy of care and love, and he pays attention to them and he listens to them, and he listens with genuine curiosity, and he remembers things, and he doesn't judge people. And so people reflect to him that which he gives. And there's a scene where he has a seizure, and one of his friends that he was previously kind to, that he treated with respect, even though he's a younger man. Prince Mishkin's 27, and this younger boy is, I can't remember how old he is, but he's younger. He treats him with respect, and as the prince has this seizure, this young boy comes and carries him away out of the crowd and actually carries him to a safe place. And the next day, when the prince comes out of his sickness, many people come to visit that he was kind to in the past. And so it's those small deeds of compassion that helped the prince be surrounded by loved ones who supported him and were able to comfort him in his time of need. And I definitely think that there's something to say about that. And so, in that sense, compassion is a virtue. However, there are many scenes throughout the story where Prince Mishkin's unwavering compassion leads to misery for other people. Throughout the main thread of the story, one of the main threads, Prince Mishkin is developing a relationship with this other man, Rogozin. Again, I apologize for mispronunciations. And Rogo, I'll just call him that for short, falls in love with this woman. He falls deeply and madly in love with this woman to the point of no return eventually. And this love that he has, this lust perhaps, it's something that's corrosive, and it corrupts him, it blinds him, and it causes him to commit many atrocious actions, deeds. One, he attempts to murder the prince. Two, he actually beats the woman that he loves. And he ultimately murders this woman. Now, the prince heard about the beating, and he was, of course, aware that he was attempting to murder him, that Rogo was attempting to murder the prince. But even after those first two strikes, the prince forgave Rogo and even invited him to come drink with him to celebrate his birthday, and everything was just fine. And it's that childlike compassion, again, that it's that same childlike compassion that made the prince someone of admiration and loved by many people, that blinded him and perhaps made him hesitate and prevented him from holding Rogo to account, or at least telling other people about what's going on, in which case he could have prevented the ultimate murder that happens at the end of the story. So the prince's compassion is something that's good, but it's also something that's bad. And it's as if compassion can't be the highest virtue. It's as if it has to be tempered by something. And I think that Lizaveta characterizes that temperance a lot better. So Lizaveta, she's perhaps the primary matriarch in the story. Her husband is General Yapachin. She has three daughters, and she's kind of a tyrant. She's very harsh with her words. She sees through people. She has this ability, like the prince, to see into people. Upon their first interaction, the prince and Lizaveta actually have a relatively good relationship, and the prince says that she's childlike, very much so like how he's childlike, and Lizaveta says that that's correct. And she knows that she can be emotional at times and maybe even kind of volatile, but she does have a deep love for her children and her husband and for the prince and for other people. There's this scene shortly after the prince has his seizure where many people are gathered around him, and these group of men visit the prince and essentially attempt to scheme him out of some money. He had recently inherited some wealth, and these men were trying to take it, or take some of it. And many people saw through the ruse, particularly the prince saw through it, and so did Lizaveta. Now, Lizaveta called them out on it, and their scheme fell apart, their story fell apart, and everyone saw this. And one of them, Ippolit, one of the young men, essentially didn't want to take responsibility for what he had done. Ippolit is a nihilistic, cynical, intellectual man, but I still say he was a man of good character. But during this scene in particular, instead of adopting responsibility and taking the blame, he starts to insult everyone and just talk about how he's better than them and how he hates the prince and the prince is a bad person. But then he starts to cough up blood, and we learn that he's dying of consumption. And everyone who was listening to him, quickly tries to comfort him, particularly Lizaveta. And so they sit him down and they tell him to rest. And Lizaveta does a few things. One, she doesn't let him get away with the fact that he's trying to dodge responsibility. She calls him out and tells him that we all see through you and we see what you're doing. And she holds him to account. But at the same time, she also comforts him. She asks people to make him tea. She insists that instead of going back home where he would have to exhaust himself more, that he rest where he was with the prince. And she was like, "Is that okay with you, Prince Mishkin?" And if I remember correctly from the scene, she actually shed a tear for him as well. And so Lizaveta she has this discerning compassion where she will call out immorality and inadequate character where she sees it, but she will also give that love and that comfort and that compassion. And that's different from the prince, who I think absolutely, in an absolute sense, gave compassion and sympathy to everyone, regardless of if they deserved it. And so the question that I am thinking about as I'm trying to reflect on The Idiot is, when does compassion go too far? Or another way of framing the question is, how do you temper compassion? Now, particularly as I'm moving forward in my journey in life and hopefully trying to have kids soon, I don't think there's any difference between the question of what are the limits of compassion and how to raise a child properly. I'm currently a behavior technician and I work with kids who have autism. I have a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old client, these two boys, and I'm getting glimpses at how they're being raised given their, in some sense, unfair disadvantage in life. What I will say is that I don't think that compassion is the bedrock upon which you build your parenting attitude. Compassion from the perspective of a parent, from what I've been seeing, is something like, my child is fine just the way they are, or even if my child acts out, I know that their intentions are good, or, well, they're only acting out because of some external reason and it's not really them. I don't think that that's the most helpful. I think that what children need is not necessarily the unconditional positive regard that Prince Mishkin had. I think that they need compassion tempered with discipline and accountability, more so like Lizaveta had. I also love her relationship with her daughters. Like, she will scold them and she will be strict with them, but she also sees herself in them, and she kisses them and loves them and hugs them, and she'll like tell them, hey, that was inappropriate. You shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't have said that joke. And then she'll be like, come here, give me a kiss. And then they'll make up and then they'll go for a walk. And that seems to be the more appropriate framework to have when you're trying to deal with, I would say, people in general, but more specifically when you're raising kids. I imagine myself wanting to balance pushing my child to be someone good and disciplined and willing to take on responsibility, while at the same time knowing that they are limited and that they can't do anything, they can't do everything. And so it's as if the limits of compassion manifest themselves in relation to your goal. And if your goal is just to, suffocate your child with love, then maybe there are no limits to compassion. But if your goal is to create an autonomous being that can go out into the world and that can be independent, but can also be someone that other people can depend on, and that can be someone that can come back to you and care for you when you need someone to take care of you, then the limits of compassion in that sense seem to manifest when they stop learning and when they stop developing. Okay, gonna end the video there. Thank you guys for listening. I'll see you in the next one.